Hi, welcome everybody. We figured we'd start out with a little video. As most of you know, we opened and 2 days later we were closed. So many of you did not get an opportunity to see the exhibition. We have a little promo video that kind of goes quickly through the highlights of this year's Museo Express and is a little bit of a teaser for next year's. We hope you'll all join us. Let's go ahead and play that now and then we'll get started with our panel.
Hi, welcome to Museo Express. I'm so happy you could come join us.
I'm Mr. Conductor. I will be your guide today for our Museo Express exhibit. Let's get going, everybody. All aboard!
As you can see from the acknowledgements panels, we are joined every year by a very, very, very large group of incredibly talented and devoted volunteers who give so much to Museo Express. It could not possibly exist without them. All of these people contributed quite a lot to this year's Museo Express. In the past, we have also had the Carrollwood Foundation that runs Walt Disney's Barn up in Griffith Park. We've had the Disneyland Railroad. We've been joined by people with private collections. So every year, it really does take a village to put this on. And we are incredibly, incredibly grateful to all of our wonderful people. So thank you. So we have here with us a number of the people who did contribute to this wonderful exhibition that maybe some of you saw, but maybe not. We know that some of you haven't seen the different train displays. We had 6 this year and many other exhibits within the exhibition. We have video of them and photos of them. So if you're talking about something and you want to ask questions, we'll try to show the visuals. And so we have here, let me just introduce some of our wonderful people who make these displays and put this together. We have Wayne Sheriff there, John Bowman, Mike Getcher, who's new with us this year, Glenn Olson, Steve Eastman, Steve Waller. You can see he's our Polar Express conductor, and some of you may have in the past brought your families to our live in-person Polar Express events when such things existed in the world. And we have John and Susie LaPrince, who are here from SCRM down in Paris, and they have been contributing for years now. And they're responsible for bringing those beautiful photographs by Jukes and Jackson and a bunch of fantastically large and very heavy railroad tools. And so we have a number of people here. Did I miss anybody?
Glenn Olson.
Glenn Olson is here. And Steve Waller is here. I said, and Steve Eastman is here. So we've got a whole group of the people who put this together. They put in many, many hundreds of hours, volunteer hours every year to bring this to you and your family. So I'll turn it over to them. If anyone has questions, you can put them in chat or raise your hand or whatever you like.
Wayne, you are still muted.
You have to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. Other than spelling my name wrong there.
We could have just muted him when he was president.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we are basically two organizations, the Train Collectors Association and the Toy Train Operating Society. And this is, I think, about our 5th year doing this. TTOS, Toy Train Operating Society, did one about 6 years ago in the old Carnegie Library building, and then we expanded it to take over this big exhibit hall room, and we've had up to eight different layouts over the years. And this year we particularly spent, I think we started in September, and we finished the 1st of November when it was supposed to open. But it's all volunteer time, and we've been very, very blessed with suppliers even giving us and lending us some of the equipment that's on the tables that you see. So, but it's been a very satisfying for everybody here.
Wayne, would you like for us to really quickly run through the 6 different displays that were up last year? We shot really short videos, so it would only take a couple of minutes to go through all, so that people who might not have been there can kind of get a little recap.
Yes, that would be good.
All right.
All right.
We will share our screen.
And while they're getting that prepared, I just also want to send out a very quick shout out to Mayor Pro Tem Steve Fessel, who financially supported this exhibition. So thank you so much, Steve, for your ongoing support of Museo Express and, of course, Muzeo as well.
I know Steve's not here. Bill is not here, but these are standard gauge engines, replicas of engines made prior to the Second World War by Lionel and Ives and other manufacturers, American Flyer, and they've been reproduced, and that's the size that they are. The 3-rail track, like Lionel has, where the power is in the center track. And a lot of the accessories on this layout here are original, and some are reproductions.
One of the things I really love about this layout, and I know not very much about all of this thing, is that it takes a minute for it to start up and it makes the actual sound. It's a really cool, I really love the standard gauge layout. Thomas, the tank engine, is moving. He's like really going.
Glenn, you should tell us about that, since you set that one up.
Well, I'll have a little more to say later about the locomotives operating on the Thomas layout. It is our only HO scale layout, but the models running are actual British steam engines, and some examples of them still exist today.
And if you'll notice, the layout has fake water around a couple of sides, because if you're familiar with the storyline, Thomas, all of the series took place on an island. So that is why it's surrounded with water.
Isn't that the Isle of Sodor?
That's correct.
That's correct. And Steve Eastman designed it and Glenn Olson built it. So it took a team to do that one.
You're gonna pick another one to show?
I think maybe they're having some technical difficulties.
Oh, it's not working?
Did it not share?
Sorry.
Oh no, we are currently looking at your like your file. is
Oh,
open,
okay,
so
no, we had it. We had the video rolling and we could see it. So let's try again.
Yeah, no, we couldn't see that one.
Can you see it now?
I just see pictures.
Let me
Let's see what's going
redo
on.
this.
We were showing yours, Wayne, so you can get ready.
Yes. Metropolitan is up next. Let's see. Okay, what's happening?
I think you guys addressed this already, but how often do you guys have this? Just during the Christmas season, or do you have is it just specifically Christmas time? You guys usually have this assembled? You guys usually get together?
Yeah, so it the exhibition takes place November, December, and January on an annual basis. So this was
Annual basis.
6th year. And yeah, so we say that it's Museo Express holiday model trains, and it's an annual tradition in downtown Anaheim.
And how long has you guys been doing this? How long has it been this going on?
The 6th year.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think maybe you guys addressed it already, but I wasn't sure. But
Oh,
that's
no.
great. That's awesome.
Do the holiday trains every year, and then our train clubs, each of them meet once a month. So the train club goes on all year long. And
Oh, wow. A train club. Okay.
holiday
Gotcha.
model trains, we come together to build that every holiday season.
There's two different clubs to work together on this.
Okay,
Nope.
you guys ready?
Are you able to see the video
I
now?
see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Will we
Ready.
see the sign?
One club meets in.
There we go.
Another
Okay,
meets
this one is
Pepsi.
this is the
York.
Metropolitan
Is that
one.
from York?
This is about 3 different scenes on here. But if you notice some of the vehicles, the stationary vehicles, they've got lights on them. And these there's a fellow friend of ours in Ontario, Canada, who does that. He buys the model
Oh,
cars
nice.
and he puts
Nice.
the little lights on it. And if you look down at the train
Little
cars,
details.
stationary train cars, it is a dining car, and all the little lights on each table light up, and on these emergency cars, the lights all flicker. Now these are new buildings that we've gotten over the past couple of years of mainly metropolitan areas. And on one, we also have a helicopter that's spinning its blades, getting ready to take off. And on the other end of the layout is a tow truck pulling another car up the hill. So
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, the truck with the branch in the front window.
So cute.
yeah, well, what can I say? And then we have the Amtrak. We have Santa Fe Streamliners running on here now, and the Amtrak goes around the mountain, and the Surfliner goes under the mountain into a tunnel with a stop underneath the hotel. But these are all made from styrofoam, sheets of styrofoam 4x8, 2 inches thick. And we cut and paste and scrape and cut and use our fingers to shape the mountains. And then we have bought lots of trees and things to put on the mountains. So there's, and all these things are available in local hobby stores. So we've used some of these things over year after year after year, but usually the backgrounds in the mountains, we try to save them, but they're styrofoam, and sometimes we just have to chuck them and start over again the following year.
Now, how long does something like that take to? Did you say you have a group of people that assemble that together, or?
Yes, what we have about a half a dozen people that work on this. Not all different people work on different layouts, and it takes us about 6 to 8 weeks to build these things. Working 3 to 4 days a week, and usually all day each one of those days. So it takes a while. You have to start with the tables, and then you stack your styrofoam, and then you do your cutting, and then you put your track around, and then you put your accessories on it. But it takes about that long without killing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne?
Right.
Yes.
Steve Fessel would like to know how much foam it takes to complete the layouts. Let's just say they're stacked as tall as I am, so the tiles of them.
Well, usually what it takes for this year, it probably took about 40 sheets of styrofoam. Plus, we've saved a lot from the previous years. But next year, we're planning on something totally different in the center of the layouts, and that we'll probably have to buy about 100 sheets of the styrofoam, which is 4x8 by 2. So
We do try to save all that we can. We save the mountains, we save a lot of the scenery, and we put it in storage so that we're not throwing it all out every year. So we do definitely try to reuse everything that we can.
Yeah.
All right, you guys ready for the Polar Express?
This is Jay Keeley's layout. Is Jay here today?
No, I don't think so.
Well, since I'm the conductor of the Polar Express, I'll talk about this a little bit. This is it's the main set is the Lionel set that came out the same year as the movie, which was, I believe, 2004. I told some of you the story that I went to the premiere of the movie and met Tom Hanks and several cast members, and it was the first time I ever wore this conductor's costume outside of the train club. So it was a big thrill. It was at the Grauman's Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, and as soon as they saw me in my costume, they let me right in and said, let's go. And I was down there just to publicize the Lionel train, and the next thing I knew, I was meeting all the people. Funny thing was, when the kids went into the movie, they ignored me. When they came out of the movie, I was like the star. That was a beautiful moment. Anyway, that lovely layout of Jay's, which I think is so well done, has a Polar Express passenger set. That was the original set, and then they did a freight set. And he also had the Polar Express elf handcar, where the elf is, or more than one elf is pumping the handcar. So that's a great layout, and the mountain he did is beautiful. So that one really shines, I think. So thank you, Jay Keeley.
Thank you, Jay. And Steve Waller actually portrays the conductor every year at when they used to be live and in-house Polar Express parties. and he comes in as the conductor and he reads the book. And then everybody sits around and watches the movie, and we drink hot chocolate and have cookies, and it's a huge hit. This year, obviously, we couldn't do that, but Steve graciously came in and read not only the Polar Express on video, which was supposed to be shown in the month of December because we had permissions from the publisher for that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We created the theater to look like a train car. So, and he also read some other books for that. And Mandy and I read some books that were classic books that are
Little
that
Red
have trained-
Caboose,
yeah.
Toodle, a little engine that could, and
all those.
yeah.
So it was fun. So we still wanted to preserve that tradition of reading train books to the kids. And thank you, Steve. You did an amazing job on that. Yes.
That was fun. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
So hopefully we can play that next year as well. If we can.
Yay.
So, yeah, it's really good.
And this
Kudos.
is the first time I've tried a virtual background, and it works pretty well. If I
Perfect.
move, it gets a little weird, but that's a little weird with my hat there. But in general, that's just the front of the book that I have right here, and the only thing I couldn't get rid of is the Catholic Award medal. That's
Kind of looks like the moon, though. It's
yeah. Next year I'm going to put the moon up there, and then it'll be
So the cheese.
Geez,
the moon?
that's a different book.
Yeah.
All right, next train display we have
Post-war.
post-war.
So Larry and Lois are
about that?
not here, I don't think. I did talk to Larry this morning in that, but a lot of the trains and buildings here are meant to be reminiscent of the types of trains you would have been able to go out and buy in the 1950s.
You can see the Polar Express houses and oh, that's a Plasticville pond, they call it, and the gas station with animated sign. The main set there is a Union Pacific Lionel set that it came out with in 1950, and that's a reproduction of it. Works great. So thank you, Larry and Lois Carpenter. They're not here today, but thank you to them.
Really quickly, during the opening weekend, which was short but very sweet, Katie arranged to have build-it-yourself train kits distributed to any of the children who came. Could you address that really quickly for Steve? He had that question in chat.
Sure. So one of the things, and our director of programs and events, Bert Kenda, is also on the line, but I'll just speak for the both of us. So one of the things that Mandy and Della and the entire team put together this year that's super fun and engaging for the younger ones is this activity called Can You Find It? So at each one of the displays, the creators, designers, builders of the displays chose about 5 little objects or little scenes that were their favorite. So for example, if we're looking at the Radiator Springs layout, there's the UFO that's like, taking up the cow. And so there's really fun little things in each one of the displays. And so we took those and we made them into a scavenger hunt. So all of the families that came for the opening weekend, they got a scavenger hunt. And when they completed the Can You Find It scavenger hunt, and even if they didn't, who cares? We worked with one of our partners, the Child Creativity Lab, to hand out build-it-yourself train kits. And so in those kits, it was all recycled materials. It's something that's really important to Muzeo. Every year, Della does something called Trash Art, and this year was virtual. So all of these recycled materials, and the kids took them home and they used them to build their own trains. And we got some of those shared back with us, and we had a lot of fun with it. So,
And we
thanks
see
for mentioning that.
on screen there, Steve
Yeah.
and Susan have their
Yeah, they have their kit. Thank you. Okay, so The last of our moving displays is Radiator Springs, and we'll go ahead and cue that one up for you. We also have a short video of the lobby case, which greets everyone. Normally that's open to the public, but this year, not so much.
Yeah.
All right. Ready for Radiator Springs?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm seeing Wayne's train track above his head.
Yes. We all like trains a lot. All right.
A lot of the buildings used in this layout were made by Mattel from what they call the Precision series. They stopped making them quite a number of years ago, so I can't get any more of them. I love them because they have all the, it looks like downtown Vegas with all the lights. The flying saucer has nothing to do with Radiator Springs, but I love it, so it got stuck in the corner. And that's made by Menards. And about a month ago, Menards released a new flying saucer. This one is an M&M theme one, and it's pulling in the little M&M peanut characters.
Oh, that's so cute.
How
That
cute.
could actually go in post-war, right? Post-war has a bunch of M&M stuff.
Well, yeah, Larry and Lois, especially Lois, her house used to be filled with M&M stuff. So yeah, that would be typical for them.
It's really cute.
When you said Vegas, I thought that was that place where you stop where you get the beef jerkies. You know that place where on your way to Vegas.
Yeah,
There's this
fresh jerky place.
that jerky place. That's what I was thinking of. The alien. You know the alien. I don't know.
That must be where they get the cows. Yep.
That's true.
All right, so we'll quickly show you the lobby case that greets everybody. And Wayne puts that together every year. It's a little glary because of the reflections, but you can see he changes it out every year. This year we had the Holiday Thomas and the logging train.
Yeah, these are just some of the trains that I bring from home. The logging train is pulled by a shay. It's a typical, it's a special engine used in the mountains to haul logs. And if you notice, all the gears are all on the side, on one side of the engine that pull the train. It doesn't run fast. It never ran fast, but it had a lot of power to pull all those logs that they would use as lumber, getting the logs from the forest to the sawmills. So it's
the gearing on them was such that they could pull a load of logs and climb hills at the same time.
right.
So this year we were joined thanks to John Bowman, who actually made some wonderful introductions for us this year and brought in the Model T and the live steam. And Mike Getcher is responsible for creating some incredible models that were in our gallery. We'll go ahead and share the screen. This is a model of the Falk. Take it away, Mike, because this is a stunner.
Hello, everybody. Obviously, my trains are a little bit larger. This is a 7.5-inch gauge live steam, fully operable model of the Falk, which I built over the course of 20 years. Yes, it took that long. I've got about 3,000 hours of work into it. It's almost entirely scratch built. We buy valves, we buy bolts, we buy some of the pipe fittings, and literally everything else, with the exception of one gear as I'm looking at it, is made in the machine shop I have in my garage. Just a labor of love, kind of went a little bit nutty there at the end, spending a lot of time, but it came out beautifully. I love woodwork too, and there it is. So I really enjoyed that. That's kind of the mantelpiece now. It doesn't get run. It does operate on air though. So it came out very nice. Very pleased with that. And then I'm assuming you're going to show the next one, either the, I can do either Lima or the Plum Cove, the electric, Mandy?
Yes.
Or you want me to do answer questions here?
Yeah. If anyone has any questions on the Falk, please ask now and we'll keep that up on screen.
Or we can show the live stream too.
Well, yeah. Okay. We'll show the live stream.
Is the Falk a logging type locomotive?
It is. It still exists. In fact, it's owned by the state of California. It's up at the Fort Humboldt Museum and still operable. I think it's 1884. It's a small logging locomotive. It was pretty much relegated to yard use pretty quickly because it just didn't have a lot of capacity. They use that winch that's on the front of it to yard logs, to pull them out of places in the woods and bring them down to the actual railroad. Here on the screen, we have another portion of that riding scale or live steam hobby. This is Acme #2. This is a kit, and I built this for Acme, which is Orange County Model Engineers, probably 10 or 12 years ago or better. I'm a member there, have been for some time. And this is what you would call an entry-level kit. It's a little beat up here, but it's got a lot of kid use, as I understand it, there on the railroad. It's battery powered, and these are pretty affordable. They're about $1,900 for the kit. Plus the cars behind it, of course, if you want them. The caboose was built, I believe, by Russ Green at the club, did a beautiful job on that. You can tell that the tracks are 7.5 inches apart. In the riding scale world, as we call it, there are a number of clubs. You know, our layouts are quite a bit larger than the ones that these gentlemen have been making, in some cases into the hundreds or even thousands of acres. Locally, there's Orange County Model Engineers, Riverside Live Steamers, LA Live Steamers. Those are clubs, and you can, if you have your own equipment, you can go up there and play and run, or you can sometimes use the equipment at the club itself. I also go every year to a place up in Chiloquin, Oregon called Train Mountain, where there is 2,800 acres and 37 miles of track, real miles. So it's really an all engaging hobby for me. I really enjoy it. And I think you have another image there too of the Lima. So the Lima is unique. That's also completely scratch built, literally scratch built. There's a Briggs & Stratton engine inside. The rest of it was designed using AutoCAD and laid out. I had some of the pieces cut out on a laser, but the rest of it was all machined, once again, at my shop in the house. This particular model has been taken to Train Mountain now every year for 3 years and has over 150 miles of actual use. We ride behind these things for hours on end, and it's just an engaging part of the hobby. It's a little bit different. You know, I love the HO and O scale stuff as well, but this is where my heart's at. So really enjoy this. This is a duplicate of a switch engine built by the Lima Locomotive Company, which built superpower locomotives, of course, the biggest steam engines, as well as the Shays, which Wayne had pointed out as well.
So bonus points for anybody who can figure out what the lamp on that train is made from.
You remember.
Anyone?
Well, I know it's not a genie of the lamp.
No? Good try. Anybody? What does that look like?
A jewel?
Okay, Mike, might as well tell them.
It's a melon scoop.
Melon scoop.
I went to Bed Bath & Beyond, and you can see the little stem on the bottom. It's just a little scoop for scooping out melon. And I machined a little bezel for it, made an LED light, and off it goes. So pretty fun.
And I just want to share a really super quick but cute and meaningful story. On our opening weekend, we actually had a couple of families who came with children that are on the autism spectrum, which was really, we were a little bit worried about the amount of noise in the gallery for these couple of kids, but they were super comfortable. They love trains. And in particular, there was one child who really loves cabooses. And so he spent a lot of time telling me, and he doesn't normally talk to strangers, but he spent a lot of time telling me, Mike, about how much he loved that Acme caboose.
That's cool. Yeah. I have
That's awesome.
I have a special needs son at home too. So, and he came by. So it was very cool to see.
Next year, we're absolutely going to make sure that we plan special days and special activities because it's a wonderful exhibition for that community. And we want to make sure that everybody with sensory processing disorders and learning disorders has the ability to come experience the exhibition in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, it was cool. Thank you.
Katie, this is Glenn. At our club events, the ones that we have at the large shows, it's always surprising to me how many special needs kids come and enjoy the trains, especially kids on the autism spectrum. Like you, I was under the impression that the noise and the motion might be too much for them, but they seem to really enjoy the trains.
Yeah, yeah, that's it was interesting because there was multiple family groups just in those 2 days that said specifically that this is something that their children look forward to, and that trains are like the thing. So, you know, knowing that now, we have the opportunity to really do everything we can to outreach to that community.
Awesome.
Pretty cool.
Very cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right.
And because this year, our theme was kind of the STEM of STEAM, because we wanted to incorporate some science and everything in, because it was something we could do without having to have a lot of docents on board. The Southern California Railway Museum in Paris, which if you haven't been there, do go as soon as you possibly can. It's amazing. We know a group of wonderful people there who really stepped up to the plate to make our STEM, or rather, as you can see here, STEAM, the STEAM of STEAM, because we have an art component too, really shine this year. We had Brian Watts make wonderful videos for us addressing the S, the T, the E, and the M of trains, and they shot that out at SCRM. And John and Susie LaPrince not only brought in a bunch of STEM, because John was a science teacher, and they're both educators, and they provided wonderful materials for us to put on the didactics in the museum, but also lent their personal collection of Jukes and Jackson photos. We have 6 of them here. John and Susie, take it away.
Out of the museum.
Hold on, you got to start now.
The first one is the picture of Lizard Head with one of the first trains over the Rio Grande Southern. Up, picture change now. We're along the Grand River, which is now called the.
Sorry, I put it back on the Lizard Head pass.
Okay.
Okay.
This is one of the first trains over the Rio Grande Southern. If you look closely at the track, when you can get close to the picture, there are boulders instead of gravel for the ballast that was just laid to get the train over without the ties moving. They put boulders between the ties. And the 2 cars are both survivors. One of them at Knott's Berry Farm, one at the Railroad Museum at Golden, Colorado. Locomotive, unfortunately, has passed on to paper clips and razor blades.
Oh.
But picture is taken in 1892 at the completion of the railroad, which promptly went bankrupt in 1893. I'm looking at a picture of a Mason bogie on originally the Denver, South Park and Pacific, which was progressively taken over by the Union Pacific Railway. And this is a photographer's train. The reason for the single cars is that's where the dark room was for taking the pictures. The pictures are large format, approximately 18 by 21 glass plates. So you're looking typically at a contact print. And it's evident in the picture because when you go deep in the picture, you can see buildings way far in the distance, quite detailed. You know, go in and read names on them and things like that. Just amazing. Try the next one. So it's a Mason bogie locomotive, a 266 made by Mason Machine Works. My personal favorite, 404 on the Denver and Rio Grande. This is taken about 1904, just prior to the application of Janey couplers. And sisters to this locomotive operated at Knott's Berry Farm. They operate original number 400 and 409. This was in the original 12 as number 404, and a Harrington signal order board. This particular picture was considered the best picture ever taken by Lucius Beebe, who was a pioneer in producing railroad books. Obviously, it's an accountant's disaster because you're using 3 locomotives to lift 3 cars and a caboose. up a 4% grade using, if those are loaded cars of coal, probably using a full car of coal to do this. The reason for the picture, we don't know, but Jukes had friends, so they would sometimes do something like this or pose something like this for his photographic desires. Try another one here. 227, a Grant locomotive built by Grant Locomotive Works, one of the earliest 280s for the Denver and Rio Grande. And again, looking closely, you can see a poster in the front window of the cab. This is the fireman's side. And you can see curtains. Engineers would and firemen very often decorate their locomotives, ornament them. Obviously, the curtains in the cab for a mirror switch engine is, sort of unusual or uncommon. And you can see a poster, a political poster in there supporting some candidate, over Cleveland, perhaps. Carload of coal. That's a good to see it close up. Air brakes have been applied. You have an air pump. So again, about 1907 for this particular picture.
And John's not mentioning it, but Fred Jukes invented different lenses and cameras that would take different speeds, and it was really foremost in photography. The type of pictures he was taking were first of their kind. And his glass plates he lent to his friend to keep for him, and the friend thought he wasn't coming back for them and dumped them. And so it's kind of special that he actually, so many of them were saved.
Wow.
These are tools from the museum that include a spike maul, various spikes, some of the hammers that are used around the property for boiler work. You can see a flue roller, a hunk of boiler plate material that was no doubt replaced probably on the number 2, or Ventura County number 2. We're in a unique museum in that we have the largest collection of number 2 locomotives. Number 2 from Waimanalo Sugar, the Chloe. Number 2 from Nevada Central. Number 2 from Ventura County. Number 2 from Mojave Northern. Again, pipe wrenches used for everything on locomotives, a lot of piping for air and steam.
And they all teach the method, and they all teach simple machines. So you're using your arm,
the lever,
and so they're either lever,
in stem.
Right. How old are those tools? What are those tools? How old are those tools? Are they? Do they know? Vintage kind of tools, or?
Yeah, they're still used. They're vintage for other people, but they're still commonly used on our steam locomotive. It's stuff that we seek out specifically, and in some cases have inherited from railroads.
Wow.
Both electric and steam. We have volunteers that showed up that were at the beginning of our museum that were, familiar with boiler work on the age of steam, brought tools, and the tools continue while the members have passed.
So we really did teach the STEM of steam in many ways through the tools, as they were saying, as kind of simple machines, and also how steam locomotives work. So John and Susie brought us this model. We had another one in there, and then we also had a didactic explaining how steam locomotives work.
The model you just showed used to be commonplace in every high school in America.
It's really cool. We actually met John when he was demonstrating that out at SCRM in Paris, and that's how Mandy and I met John and started this wonderful partnership when he was there on Thomas the Tank Engine Day demonstrating this steam model to the kids that went by. And since we're just big kids, we went by too. We got to know John and Ken and a bunch of people from, Ken was Jingles the Elf, by the way, in the promo. and a bunch of the people there, and it's a fantastic, fantastic museum. So as soon as museums open up, I absolutely encourage all of you to go out there. It's one of our favorite places ever.
We too experienced the same fun of COVID with being open for 2 weekends and then nothing.
Well, that's Barn 6, which is narrow gauge. We're the only museum in the United States that has 3 gauges, actually. We have the 42-inch, which is our
LA Railway.
LA Railroad. See my shirt there. If you can see my
Santa
shirt.
Fe. That's full size.
This is full size. That's standard gauge. We have standard gauge, which is
wow.
4
Nice.
feet 8.5 inches, and then we have our 3-foot gauge, which we are working on those engines.
Clandestinely.
All right, Steve, take it away.
Well, what you're looking at is what they call a Challenger. It's an articulated locomotive. These were originally built in the 70s by a gentleman, actually, I believe he's in the California area, named Harmon. And he made a handful of them. They're custom made. This is not you don't go down to the hobby shop and buy them. And they became quite valuable. But a man named Jim Waterman bought all of the tooling from Harmon, and he is now making them, but they are special orders. It's not a production run. If you want one, you've got to get a hold of him and ask him, and he doesn't have a website, so it's one of those kind of things you have to know somebody to get in. In the last few years, he has now built me 5 custom locomotives. This is by far the biggest one of the 5. This thing, that's a 32-inch display case, if I recall. And
yes,
they could just barely get the cover over the front and the back of the engine.
Yes, it was very exciting getting that on there. Very exciting.
They promised me they wouldn't scratch it when they put the lid on.
Right, absolutely never.
Hey, Steve, I don't know if people understand what articulated means for those.
Well, in this case, you basically, this is 2 steam engines in one. If you notice, there's a steam chest in the front, just ahead of the front wheels, and then right in the middle is another steam chest. So this is basically 2 locomotives in one. So it's a big locomotive, and everything has to move and turn separate of each other to make it around turns. And believe it or not, this monster was actually designed to run on the original size Lionel standard gauge track, which is 42 inches. It looks ugly doing it, but it would do it. Because
the 2 sets of driving wheels pivot independently of the other. So
yes.
So it moves like that. And then there's some locomotives that are that size that they call rigid frame, and those wheels don't pivot, but you have to keep those kind of on a straightaway, whereas this one can make curves really well.
It runs beautifully. I've got a couple of hours of run time on it. And of course, right now it's with the COVID thing, we're not having our club meets anymore. And it won't fit and run on my layout at home. So the only place I can run it is at club meet. So it hasn't been getting any run time for the last year or so. But
I have a question regarding the gauges. You keep mentioning all the different ones and then standard. Is standard what everybody typically uses, or is there a gauge that you prefer over the other ones?
I don't. We actually have a little display board there at the museum with different size track on them. And I wish you had that so we could explain it. But anyway, the gauge is the span between the 2 outer rails. Okay. and you start off with N gauge, which is, I don't know the scale offhand. Then HO is 1/87th or something like that. And then you go up to S gauge, which is a little bit wider, and then O gauge, and then G gauge, and then standard gauge. So within the normal, okay, yeah, the series of cars right here. That's what you're looking for. The car on the far left is G gauge, and surprisingly, the track spacing on that is narrower than the blue car right next to it. That one is standard gauge. And then the white car and the brown car are both O gauge. And this is where you get into the confusion of scale and gauge. The brown car is what we would call O gauge. The white car, we call it O scale. You know, it's proportionate to a real engine, whereas the brown car fits more into the toy train arena. And the red car is S gauge, and the blue one, I believe, is HO. And for anybody that knows it, HO stands for half of O. So the track spacing is half the size of O gauge. And then some of the ones over farther on the right are some real oddball ones that I was able to find. They were OO and TT or something like that. Not real common ones.
We should also mention that we've used the word standard gauge in two different contexts. In toy trains, it's roughly a little more than 2 inches wide. And then there's the standard gauge that you guys use out at the Southern California Railway Museum, and that's 4 feet 8.5 inches wide. That's the standard gauge that most of the trains you'll find in America run
Right,
on.
and they were talking about the different gauges that they run. So even in the real world, you kind of run into the same thing that we run into in the toy world, you know.
And the riding gauge that was referred to earlier is 7.5 inches wide. 7.5 inches. That's usually the size. Like, I'm a member of the Los Angeles Life Steamers, and we only let the public run on the 7.5 inch gauge. Anything smaller than that, we have them, but we don't let the public ride on that because it's a little too wobbly.
Okay, this one. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, Steve, one last thing. The term standard gauge as it applies to toy trains is a term that was cooked up by Lionel.
Right.
To as sort of an advertising thing. So their trains were the standard of the world.
Right. And the other thing was their trains were not standard with anybody else's. So it was kind of ridiculous.
It was actually the unstandard gauge, if you will, when they created it. But the word or term standard gauge. And when they became kind of the leader of the world in toy trains, what was interesting was you had American Flyer and Ives and Dorfin. They could not call their trains standard gauge because Lionel had the rights to the name. So those other manufacturers made what they called wide gauge.
Yeah. Steve, there's also Z gauge. And that Z gauge is so small, you can put a layout in a briefcase.
Yes. Yeah, which I don't think I had Z gauge on that display.
No.
I think TT was probably about the smallest.
Popularity wise, we have to admit that HO is the most popular size. Many of us use O gauge if we like the 50s trains like me. And then standard gauge would be folks who like the trains from the 1920s and 30s.
Right.
And the modern reproductions.
Right. And almost all of your standard gauge, because they stopped making standard gauge in the late 30s. Okay. So almost all standard gauge even the reproductions are made out of tin. They're not plastic. You want to back up to the Disney? There you go. give my grandson a shout out on here. This was put together by my grandson Liam. This is a set that came out about 2 years ago with the Disney station and the train, and it is designed to actually work on Disney's app. So you have to the Lego Disney app. So unless you log into it and run it with your phone, it doesn't work. not that I'm going to run it anyway, but anyway.
Hey, this is John Bowman. Just to let you know, I'm holding a real actual Märklin Z-gauge locomotive from Germany in my hand.
Yeah.
Oh,
Awesome. You see my thumb. You see my thumb here, my finger. You see how small that is?
Yeah.
There's the front of it.
Wow.
But anyway,
Don't squish the poor thing, John.
With the figures and everything, this is a complete kit from Lego. Okay, this is one out of my personal collection. This is a very early small Lionel set, and it's O gauge. And the signals in the background were made by a company called Marx. Again, this is a Hafner wind-up set. The signals in the back were in fact Hafner also.
Sorry, Steve.
That's all right. Okay, this is Ives. This is a number 2 passenger set, and the engine is a number 2, but the actual set number was also called a number 2. Pretty hard to find, and it runs nicely.
John Bowman has a wonderful collection of railroad pocket watches, and we were quite fascinated to learn all that we didn't know about railroad watches and why and how they differ from normal pocket watches. John, would you be so kind?
Sure.
I have the one photo here, but we had 4 beautiful ones in the museum.
Yeah, railroad pocket watches were very important in the railroad days in the 1880s as they are now. Don't forget, there was no UPS, there was no radio, there was nothing to set time. And if you go back to history, railroads in Canada and the US actually set what are now is known as time zones around the world, because 12 o'clock in New York wasn't the same as 12 o'clock in Denver. So everybody would carry a watch, and these had to be what they called railroad grade watches. And there were certain rules they had to have. For example, they had to have Arabic numerals. They cannot use Roman numerals. They had to be tested in what they call positions. So they have it upright, upside down, flat, back, and others. They would check to be sure the watch would operate correctly within a certain time with all the spaces. There were reports in the 1880s where there were a number of train wrecks because conductor's watch once stopped for 4 minutes. 2 trains were on the same track and they collided, and unfortunately it was fatal. So the pocket watches became a standard, and then many years later, I think right in the early 60s, late 50s, they did the tuning fork type watches. And then of course, we now have quartz watches, which are very accurate. And of course, now the systems are all atomic clock controlled. But there are 4 watches. The main manufacturers are Waltham, Elgin, Ball, and Hamilton. And I had 4 of them on display.
And they didn't have covers, right? They don't have
They don't have what they call a hunter case. They don't have covers because they want the person to be able to pick it up and read it directly. Also, they didn't have luminous hands like you might see now, the glow in the dark. So they wanted a black hand against a white dial. So there's certain rules to minimize, a missed call on a train. They got a little smarter later on. Western Union actually set up a program where they could telegraph a railroad station at a certain time. Usually it was 12 noon in the East Coast, and this station clock through some mechanics actually reset to the hour. Then people could calibrate their watches against that calibrated watch. There's a lot to it, but railroad watches are interesting things. Again, today they're hardly known, but then they were a big deal. And by the way, they have jewels. Most had to be at least 19 jewels. Those are the jewels that hold the mechanism and make it run, because jewels wear much less than would a metal fitting.
I think Susie has a question for you too.
Sure.
Well, it's a statement. I've had a degausser. It's a machine, or it's kind of like a thing to, I've had it for sale at railroad shows forever, but it's mostly a conversation piece because people would walk by and ask what it is. And I would tell them how important that each station, they would make sure that all of the watches had to be degaussed and reset to be exactly the same because they didn't want the accidents to happen.
That's correct. And they have, of course, some of the components are magnetic in the watch, but they got the springs down later so they could use non-magnetic type metals and things like that. So they were making progress on it. And of course, today it's a pizza quartz of rock that actually sets the timing based on a time base. But it's an interesting story to read about railroad watches. You look at any conductor, including our official conductor, Steve Waller, and you will find in his pocket, in his vest, a railroad pocket watch. There he is. Hey, Steve, hold that up again. Yeah, you know, Steve, see, there's the dial. Steve, closer to that's the dial, that's the counter. So in this case, the real railroads wouldn't allow the cover because they didn't want it to get jammed or locked, so they couldn't immediately know what the time is. So we'll have to remove that cover, Steve.
Another
modifier watch.
Another important idea was the idea of lever set.
Yep.
Instead of stem set, so you couldn't manipulate the hands without essentially taking the watch apart.
Yeah, when you turn the dial like a normal watch, if you pull out the stem, you actually can move the dials. On these watches, as he was saying, you actually had to open the glass bezel. That would engage the setting mechanism. Before you could mechanically close the case, you had to reposition that lever set.
Which makes sense if you think about the number of times I accidentally text Mandy or in a day or call. So if your watch is, in your pocket and it accidentally, starts changing at the time, that would not be good. So it's kind of like the analog version of what I do now. Yeah, yep. I'm putting things in my pocket. Yes.
And I'll throw this out just for fun. As you know, I'm involved in measurement for many, many years. And about 10 years ago, I went to National Institutes of Standard Technology in Boulder, Colorado. Two friends gave me a tour. They're with the time and frequency group. And they walked me into a room, and in that room was the atomic clock, which can only make 1 second error, I believe, in a billion years, something like that. Wow. That clock was in that room. And I went through 3 levels of security to get inside this room, but it was kind of fun to have these watches mechanically wound and be in this room with the atomic watch. And there's others around the world that all synchronize and give us the time that we use today.
Very cool. Well, since you're already talking, John, would you please tell us about this beauty?
Yes, well, thank you so much. What you see here is a Ford Model T. There was 16 million Model Ts manufactured between 1909 and 1927. What manufacturers do is they buy a chassis. Basically, it's the metal part with the wheels, mechanics, but not the wooden part. And at that time, before we had automobiles, when people come into a city, into a town on a railroad, they were picked up by a horse-drawn wagon, which is a cumbersome effort. So they were replaced by something called the depot, terrain depot hack. Hack is short for hackney, which is English for taxi. And this is one of many different styles you see on display. This one was owned by Bob and Margie Goebel in Long Beach, California. Last October, I called them because they were with the Long Beach Model T Club. They were listed as having this vehicle. This vehicle had run in 15 years, 15 years. We picked it up on a Friday. The team down there at the Model T Club had it running in 1 hour and 25 minutes. It was doing 35 miles an hour up Western Avenue, just south of Knott's Berry Farm there. It's a beautiful piece of machine that you don't see this style. This one has a curved back, which is a little bit different than most of them. But this is a depot hack. It's the construction of this thing. It's just expertise. There's the thing. 22 horsepower. Be lucky to get 30 miles an hour.
Nice, sweet.
And, this one is just simply really very nice. That's pleased, I think. Now, while it was on display, by the way, the vehicle was sold, and a gentleman, a club member named John J1 Traw, purchased it, and he will be picking up next Friday, actually out of the museum, taking this vehicle home. Another note on the pedals. There's 3 pedals on Model Ts. None are gas pedals. Your gas pedal. There's a good picture. The pedal on the left is your gear pedal. You push it down, you get low gear. If you leave it up high, which is spring loaded, you get high gear. The pedal in the middle is supposed to make you go backwards, and the pedal on the right is actually the brake. If you could bring the steering wheel there, on the right side of the steering wheel, where there's a little lever, that is your gas pedal. You raise, you lock it. One thing about a Model T, like a modern car, is more like a boat throttle. When you set it, it stays in that position. So the car, should the driver fall out, the car goes till it runs out of gas or hits something. So you have to kind of think how to operate these things. But we're very pleased to get this. It hadn't been shown in many, many years, and maybe we'll get it back next year.
Wow.
Don, I have a question for you. The wooden part, is that original to it, or was that built later?
Good question, Steve. The manufacturers, and by the way, most of the manufacturers depot hacks are former wagon manufacturers doing carriages for horse-drawn vehicles. So they actually converted their business because nobody wanted to use horses anymore, and they started doing these bodies for Model Ts. And by the way, there was a number. I understand there was like 30 or 40 of these companies that did this, and but this one was a little unique. And there's another one we just came up in the club recently, which is more common. And its version, by the way, of that Model T hack is actually at the Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield, Michigan. So that's a little more common than the one you see here. So this car is very, very unique.
I have another quiz question. Who can guess where this train depot was? This was a train station.
Santa Ana.
No, closer to us.
Santa Fe.
Los Angeles Street and Santa Ana Street in Anaheim, isn't it?
It was actually on Los Angeles Street. It was right across from the packing house.
Yes. Now, if you look at the background of my picture was the old original 1907 power plant, was kitty corner from the train station picture.
Oh, wow.
518 South Los Angeles Street, and yours would have been in the 400 block of South Los Angeles.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's the reason
that's thanks to Jane Newell. We got those wonderful photos there to sort of provide a little local history.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks. That's awesome. Look at that. All right. Anybody have any questions on anything? We will try to put up the appropriate photo or video or whatever.
I do have a picture of Christmas with Steve. What's this? Steve Waller?
Waller.
Excuse me, Wall. Here, I'll show you a picture. Where is he still online?
Yep.
Yes, he's here.
Yeah, I'm still here. I changed. There
It's
I
you
am.
and Saint Nick.
Yes, that's my good buddy Sid Mason playing Santa there. Yes, thank you for doing that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I changed my name on the screen there to Mr. Conductor because there were so many Steves. I just thought.
Too many Steves. Yeah.
Nice.
I have a
I
curious.
do have one quick question in regards to the tracks that would be necessary for the different types of trains. Can someone speak a little bit about that?
Well,
Not sure we understand your question.
Well, the different tracks are the same as we talked about before with the gauges. So the different manufacturers make different kinds of track. When I sold Lionel trains for a few Christmases, the number one question was, what's the difference between Lionel O gauge and Lionel O27? And most of the same trains ran on the same tracks. It was two styles of track made by the same manufacturer, and they ran most of the trains on both tracks. So whatever brand you get, you kind of just stick with that brand is what I would tell people. Whatever you've got, whatever came with the set, that's what you want to stick with when you add more track to it. So HO is half the size of O. It's little. O gauge is about that big. Standard gauge is about 2 inches. And now I'm talking toy train tracks. If you're talking ride-on and larger, that's a funny story because in my membership at the Walt Disney Barn, it came up that even Walt Disney got his track gauge wrong initially in his backyard railroad, which was the first, his first step to building the Disneyland Railroad. He built something in his backyard, and that was on 7¼ inch gauge, and he should have been building at 7.5 inch gauge to be compatible with other ride-on railroads. But you know, mistakes happen, and so if you had a specific question about track gauges, I could be a little more specific.
No, that answers it. Thank you.
And if any of you were here a couple of years ago, we actually had some items from Walt Disney's Backyard Railroad in the museum. We had his gondola from his backyard train, and we also had some kind of the world premiere of his trestle bents, which are the wooden supports that hold up a bridge that a train goes over, and they actually had disappeared for a long time. Nobody thought that there were any left, and they turned up, and very graciously, the people out at Walt's Barn let us display those, which was really cool. I mean, they looked good and old and crusty, and they were really neat. So, I mean, we had a whole exhibition on the Carrollwood Walt's Barn and everything there, which was really cool. A year later, they arranged for Muzeo to debut. I mean, it was the world premiere of the restored Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland car, one of the cars. They actually started restoring it, and they brought it straight from Tim Legaly's workshop right here to Muzeo. And it was, I mean, the paint was still fresh. You could smell it. Yeah. And one of the chief sign painters out at Disneyland had recreated all of the signage on it. And it was really neat to see. And hopefully they can get the funds to finish restoring the mine train cars and locomotive, and that'll be pretty spectacular. So if you haven't been up there too, when they reopen things, they're open with the Paulina will know the third Sunday of every month from, is it 12 to, when is
11
it?
to 3. 11 to 3.
And it's free.
Oh, and Adela, if you don't know it, one of the fellows who worked so hard at Muzeo on that exhibit, Jeff Eno, is now the president of the
Oh yes,
Carrollwood.
we know. We're good friends with Jeff. So we were very excited at the Christmas party they held on Zoom this year when he was announced president. Yep. Yay. And yeah. So it's a great bunch of people out there. They often have you know, Disney luminaries and people there signing books. And, you know, I met Tinkerbell out there, and it was really cool. And, you know, you just never know who will be out there. It's a super day. It's gorgeous in the park. So if you get the opportunity, you know, bring yourselves, your families up there. It's a lot of fun.
Did Tinkerbell take you for a flight?
No, unfortunately not. I'm a little heavy to fly, especially since COVID. I'm not going to get off the ground anytime soon.
Steve Eastman just called me. He dropped off, but he's coming back on.
Okay.
Oh, good.
We'll watch for him.
We'll watch for him to show up.
I saw a question. Susie?
Oh, I just wanted to mention that the inspiration for Walt Disney to have railroad interest was Ward Kimball, and that's his engines. His backyard engines are there at Barn 6. You're invited to, when we open, to come and view them. But Ward Kimball, if you look at the circus train in Dumbo, it's Ward in as engineer. So that's sort of a little interest, but he's the one that was the inspiration for Walt Disney. And Muzeo had a wonderful exhibit showing Ward through many components, his artistic endeavors, his musical expertise, and that's how we got connected with Muzeo.
Yes, And they actually run Grizzly Flats out there at SCRM, which used to be OERM, the Orange Empire Railway Museum. And I know that Steve is a member there. And if you go out there, I mean, it is massive. It is huge. If you go to the Grizzly Flats hangar, you can see Ward Kimball's Chloe. You can see the Emma Nevada. They're absolutely gorgeous trains. Talk about being a rail fanatic. He didn't have model trains or even live steam trains to ride on. He had a real train, a narrow gauge train in his backyard, which is actually my dream. And so I keep playing the lottery.
I'll just
As-
put it
as
out
a-
here. Ward Kimball was a member of Train Collectors Association. I used
As
to
a
drive
train
him to the meet every month when he stopped driving.
Oh, it's really cool.
How long will this program be on to watch for relatives today who could not watch today?
So after the program concludes in about 10 minutes, Zoom takes a little while to process it, but we're recording it. And then as soon as we do, we will upload it to our YouTube. So Kelly, I have your email. I'd be happy to shoot you an email to let you know when it's live on YouTube so your family can watch it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Curious question for any of you train enthusiasts. What inspired you to start enjoying trains? You know, I know Ward Kimball was an inspiration to Disney, but for the rest of you, obviously you've been doing this for a long time from what I hear. What kind of brought you into trains?
I can speak this interestingly. Disneyland opened in 1955. I was 3 years old. My mother took me there the third day it was open. I think that's where it started.
And you have to talk.
Couple of comments on Ward. In Ward's backyard, he had two different buildings filled with toy trains. His original inspiration for collecting toy trains was to get a railroad car, and that was fulfilled by his wife, Betty, who bought him a narrow gauge coach off the Southern Pacific narrow gauge, and then moved it to the backyard. And within 6 months, he had the opportunity to get a locomotive to go with it, from which was born the Grizzly Flats Railroad. The initial idea was to tunnel the car, take all the seats out, and ultimately it went into a building instead on his property. So his inspiration was toy trains and the collection, and it led to real trains and a collection. The toy trains were all, at his request, auctioned off to other collectors so they would have the fun of owning what he had owned at some point in time.
Well, I started trains when I was a little boy. In Chicago, we had trains in our basement for a while. But when I moved out to California and grew up, my wife in 1985 made the mistake of buying me a train to put around the Christmas tree. And from that, it just grew and grew and grew. And as you can see, I've got trains running around my office here that goes through the wall into the train room, and then it'll come back into the office again. So.
Oh, that's so cool. That is cool. That's awesome.
And I've got trains in the backyard too. So.
Well, I can speak a little bit about Mandy here, if you don't mind. When Mandy first came to work at Muzeo, I said, well, you know, how about you work on, you know, Muzeo Express with me? And she's like, oh, yeah, okay, well, I don't know anything about trains. Maybe. And then she did. And now she is as big a rail fanatic as you could possibly imagine. So I'd like to apologize sincerely to you for this very expensive habit that I'm giving her.
It's something that you don't realize is just this, it's artful and nostalgic and mechanical, and there's something in the world of trains for everyone. So like the stories and the history, it's really honestly a magical hobby. It really is.
in my case, I grew up in a house with trains. They were bought for my older brother, and I sort of got into them. They were Lionel O gauge trains, bought in the mid 50s. We had a steam set and a diesel set, and Dad put it up on a big table, and it was up permanently. And then they, when we moved, they all went into the boxes and went into the attic. And actually, they went into the basement first, where they got flooded, and then we dried them out and put them in the attic. And then I rediscovered them in high school. Real quick story. I saw King Kong, the film, on TV, and I saw the scene where King Kong wrecks a train, and I thought, you know, I've got everything I need to remake that scene, but do it Gumby style. So I had a clay creature called King Clay, and took my Lionel trains, and he wrecked them, and I won a Kodak Teenage Movie Award with that film. So as I was making that film, I thought, gee, I wonder if I could add more trains. I thought people must have them in their garages, and I figured they wouldn't be worth very much. And so I found out the hard way how much, even in that year, which was 1970 something, the trains had already become valuable collector's items. So I've been collecting them ever since.
Very cool. Mike, what about you?
Unmute. You know, I think I grew up like most kids with the Lionel set, you know, from my dad. But then that just kind of evolved slowly over time. I loved the Model Railroader magazine, and I think I was captured by this combination of mechanics, history, and art. And that's really where, and I think the three of us talked about that a little bit. It really is about the art of that. And so combine craftsmanship and the fact that every time I work on something small, I end up working on bigger versions of it, from model trains to bigger ones, to model ships to bigger ships. You know, things like that happen. So that's where my progression ended up. You know, the writing scale is perfect for me. I just love it. And I'm actually building a 15-inch gauge locomotive now, which was considered the smallest, I guess, commercially viable gauge by the English back in the late century and a half ago. So, you know, it is a passion. It consumes you. I don't spend as much money as you might think. The Lima only costs about $1,500, you know, but I build it in my shop. So that's
right.
Yeah,
exactly. And Mike, right now, just for those of you who don't know, he's actually sitting on a battleship. He works out at the USS Iowa Battleship Museum. And he is right now on a battleship, which is probably the weirdest place anybody has ever joined us for a Zoom call. So thank you.
I played the battleship game.
Yeah, and you know what? That is a very, very cool museum. Mandy and I had the great pleasure to go out there and see that, and it is really, really cool.
Nice.
So if you get the chance, go. It's a beautiful ride.
Definitely. Yeah. I have a question. You guys earlier, I believe you mentioned Walt Disney. How did the museum acquire Walt Disney's property, or you guys got to display his trains or the property?
It was an interesting chain of events. We actually had an exhibiting artist here, Jeff Mitchell, who had volunteered out at the barn for a long time. And he introduced me to Nathan Ike, who was then president. He was a curator at the time. And he came out and visited, and they had literally never lent their stuff out to any other museum or organization. So we actually hit it off quite well, and they decided to go ahead. They ran it through the board and decided to go ahead and do an exhibit with us. And apparently they liked what we did. We had to work with Disney Legal a lot, which is always very interesting. Like they're very specific to work with. And they were pleased with what happened. The head of their archives actually, Becky Klein, actually worked with Nathan, and they did a presentation here, which was really cool. And they've been willing to work with us ever since. And this is not something that they do with other organizations, so it's pretty cool. And same with Disneyland Railroad. They basically don't lend their stuff out, and we ended up forming a really good partnership with the guys out there, and they also are willing to lend us their artifacts, which are pretty cool. So we've been very fortunate. I think they see that we are huge rail fans and that our interest is quite genuine, and that we really like to promote all of this because, you know, there's really no aspect. I mean, first of all, it's fun. We all know Disneyland's fun and model trains are fun, but there's almost no aspect of American history that wasn't touched in some way by the railroads. It's basically all encompassing. So we never run out of stories to tell. You know, we told the story of the Harvey House and how that was sort of an instrumental thing for young women at the time, working peripheral to the railroads, but very much influenced by the railroads. We have many more stories to tell, so we will never run out of topics or enthusiasm. And we absolutely love working with the TTOS and the TCA and all of these guys and all of our partners. We couldn't be happier every fall when this rolls around.
Thank you all so much for being a part of this
SCRM,
too.
yes, thank you.
Every year we meet new people that just adds to the whole exhibition. So
they become family to us. So
what's
thank
that,
you.
Susie?
Oh, you have a strange family.
Yeah.
We have a strange family, but we love them.
And I rode trains all the time to New York, to Chicago, because my dad lived in Chicago. And so I continued to ride trains and thought I'd have a great idea to take my 14-year-old daughter, and we rode train. This is coach for 3 months when she was 14, and that's an experience. But I discovered that I was so interested in the brotherhoods that were so important for the workers, and the reason that labor organization was so important for the beneficiaries of people that got ill or injured, and the importance. And I got involved with collecting the dance cards because the Lady Society would put on dances, and the artwork, the lithography, the chromolithography is just fantastic. And I started collecting the dance cards where they would put on these dances to collect money so that if the railroad men were injured, that those people would be taken care of. And the brotherhoods are so important for the work day. We don't have 7 days a week. We have 5-day work week, 8-hour day. It's all based on the brotherhood and how important the organization was.
Absolutely. We also had an exhibit on that when we had SCRM highlighted in the theater in the main gallery, and it was really, really, really informative. I didn't realize why we don't have, you know, a 6-day work week, or, you know, in some cases back in the bad old days, 7, and, you know, the 8-hour workday and everything. We really owe the railroad brotherhood. So it's really interesting.
Excuse me, I'm not sure if Brian got his question answered. Was he interested in finding out how Ward Kimball's stuff got to the Orange Railway?
Ward was courted by some of the members that knew him, and we visited up there, and in the process, he had donated one piece of equipment to the state of California, but they completely rebuilt it to brand new. And he thought it should be preserved as sort of as is, where is, still being a usable item. So he ultimately decided that he would come to put his materials at the Orange Empire Railway Museum. They purchased a suitable building, and he funded the construction of that building and the initial construction of 3-foot gauge track to move his Grizzly Flats Backyard Railroad and ultimately the equipment therein to the museum. The little depot ended up being donated to John Lasseter and ended up going up to Northern California and was burned in the Sonoma fire, unfortunately, along with memorabilia from Ward. We have all of his rail equipment, which is 2 locomotives, the Emma Nevada and Nevada Central #2, Waimanalo Sugar #2, which is his #1 Chloe, a little Hawaiian 042 locomotive, plantation engine, fits in your back pocket conveniently. And he has the original car, which is Southern Pacific Narrow Gauge Coach 5, a coach built by, I forget the builder. Anyway, that was
Thank you, John.
the original inspiration for the railroad, along with a number of other freight cars that have joined it. And we have about maybe a quarter of a mile of track,
And his hand car.
half a mile of trackage, a turntable.
And his hand car actually was exhibited at Museo Express last year.
That's right. It was. We had a lot of fun with that. So I do
That's
encourage all
the velocipede?
sorry.
Velocipede, right? The velocipede. not
We
the-
have a velocipede, yes, but has been on loan for somebody to do measurements and got stuck in Central California because of COVID.
Yeah.
So it hasn't yet returned. It was supposed to be back in November.
So we do encourage all of you when things open up again to go visit these other wonderful museums. And again, we really do thank our partners. We could not do this without you. And we look forward to Museo Express every single year. I'd like to thank all of you for coming and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was really nice. Thank you.
So much.
I enjoyed it.
Fun.
We'll see the
Thank
rest
you.
of you for deinstallation
Yes.
soon. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Hope to see more of it next year.
Yes, definitely.